Hello everyone, Robert Farrah of Robert Farrah's Tea and Tarot here. There's the tarot and there's the coffee. I've got a frog in my throat today, so it's going to be all husky and interesting. I'd like to give you a quick whirl through the tarot books that I would recommend. I did quite a lot of reading over the past 2 years, and I've kissed a few frogs. So there are some books that I wouldn't recommend to my worst enemy. But here's 5, 6 that you might like to think about in approximate order of recommendation, starting with maybe the least recommended and working my way up to the most fabulous. This is The Tarot by Alfred Douglas. It's from the 70s. It's a lovely book. It's really of historical interest. It's the research that has taken place since the 70s has made it slightly obsolete in some ways. But the thing about Alfred Douglas is he was taught by a woman who was taught by the Golden Dawn. So whatever you think of the Golden Dawn, he does come from a real one-to-one lineage of tarotists, magicians, esotericists, call it what you will. So in that respect, it's really interesting. His system is quite similar to the Rider-Waite-Smith system, but he goes his own way a little bit in some of his interpretations, and the book came out with a pack of cards, which is still available today as a reprint. And as you can see, there's the 6 of Battens, a little bit different from Pamela Colman Smith's images. A little bit eccentric. Some of the cards diverge from the RWS to the extent that in 2 or 3 cases it's a little bit confusing. But this is an amazing artifact from the 70s, this book and this deck of cards. So I have great affection for the book, and it's the book with which I learnt tarot. Coming up into the 21st century, here we have Tarot Beyond the Basics by Antony Louis. Antony Louis is a psychiatrist and a very brainy gentleman. I would say this book is of interest if you don't take it too seriously. The author tells us some great numerological things about the tarot, about the structure of the tarot, how it works. He's a hardcore Jungian, and he breaks the cards down into elements, and then he breaks the elements down. You know, this element is cold and dry, and that element is hot and wet. And sometimes it gets really complicated, and you just have to kind of let go. I bought this book because I was researching the court cards, which I think is an unclear area of the tarot, and he was quite interesting about the court cards. So yeah, for a rather an unusual take on tarot, I would recommend this. He sometimes describes fascinating readings that he's had in the past, which I find rather dull, but you can skip those bits. Here's a guy called Robert M. Place. Robert M. Place is quite a famous and quite successful tarot designer, and he has created a number of decks which are very popular. He's sort of an artist and historian, sort of an art historian tarotist, and his book's really nice, and it's nicely written, and he talks about the origins of the tarot, and he talks about the RWS images one by one, and he really approaches these images as a designer, as an artist, and he talks about what he sees in them and why that's important. So a nice read, Robert M. Place, The Tarot, which I would recommend. I wouldn't base my whole tarot reading practice on it, but it's nice to have on your shelf. Here's a really interesting book. It's a tiny little book, looks like it's self-published, by Yolanda M. Robinson. I've managed to track down some video footage of her on YouTube, and she's a splendid lady. She's obviously a real tarot teacher and workshop leader. I think she's in the Americas somewhere. And I just stumbled upon this book when I was researching the court cards. Now, Yolanda M. Robinson is as you can see, she's a Kabbalist. Now, Kabbalah, I have, to be brutally frank, I have zero interest in Kabbalah, but she doesn't really let it overwhelm her book. She talks in Kabbalistic terms sometimes, and it's sort of infused with, the wisdom that she gets from Kabbalah. What I want to say is that it's one of the best, juiciest and most helpful descriptions of the 16 court cards that I've come across. And I really found this extremely helpful when I was writing my book. You may know that the court cards are related in quite complicated ways to the minor arcana. Like each court card relates to 3 minor arcana cards. And this can become very confusing and very challenging, but she has a sort of poetic way of synthesizing all this strange traditional material and turning it into something very human and very inspiring. So that's a lovely book to get your hands on if you can. Now, there are historians who write about the tarot. Some of them write in a very kind of dismissive way, the tarot's a load of bullshit and this is why. But if you've had bad experiences with snotty historians talking about how awful the tarot is, Paul Huson here is a great antidote to that, because he's really clever, he's really well informed. He had a very famous book years ago in the 70s or 80s, and then much later he came up with these two. So it's basically this book, and then this is a sort of digest of this book, Mystical Origins of the Tarot. So Paul Houston is pro-tarot, he's pro-divination, and he's on our side, basically. And he has another look at the historical background of tarot cards, where they come from, and he addresses the question of, were tarot cards always esoteric, or was the esoteric bit sort of imposed upon them later? And he thinks it's a bit of each. Now, what's really, really good about this book is that he goes through the entire pack and gives you a roundup of meanings from the basic traditional sources like Etela and the various members of the Golden Dawn, and sometimes even the very, very old sources like Proteses Cartomancer. So you can look at, for example, the Ten of Swords, and you can see what these traditional sources said about this card, and then you can work out for yourself exactly how you want to read it. He's fantastically good, by the way, about court cards, and he says which mythical figures are traditionally associated with each court card. Paul Huson has created his own deck, Dame Fortune's Wheel Tarot. It's neither Rider-Waite-Smith nor Marseille nor Thoth. It's his own thing. So if you were going to read tarot with this deck, it would have to be your only deck. I mean, it's a splendid achievement, and I'm very, very admiring of it, but it's not for me. Nevertheless, you can read this book and, again, find out what he has to say about the court cards, which is always fascinating. And here he has personally illustrated each card. And then, if you really want, you can buy that deck. Fantastic. Thank heavens for Paul Huson. He is our best ally, I think. There's a little bit of crap on the book there. Number one in my hit parade is a book which I keep on promoting. I should be getting paid by Taschen. It's Jessica Hundley's The Tarot, published by Taschen, and it's simply the most gorgeous picture book. If you're a beginner, it's got some chapters at the beginning telling you about the history of tarot. If you're an experienced tarotiste, you probably know all that already. But, cut to the chase, it's a picture book in the Taschen tradition, and a very, very splendid one too. So if there's a tarotist in your life, give them this for Christmas. Or if you are the tarotist in your life, rush out and buy it for yourself. You won't regret it. It's absolutely gorgeous. So everyone, thanks for listening. That was Robert Farrah of Tea and Tara. I'm a traitor. I'm drinking coffee. I'm rather busy today, so I'm going to dash. Have a lovely day. Bye.